Yes, we are live. Finally. Hi, Richard. Nice to
Hello.
meet you. And how are you?
Nice to meet you too. Doing well.
As usual, this is the part where we, pretend that we never met before, that we are not already talking for 10 or 15 minutes before the live. But
Indeed.
yeah, that's how the cool kids do it. So we're gonna do it. Hi everyone, once again for this. I think this is I actually have right here. So it's the 11th episode of the Security Break podcast. This little project of mine where I invite cool people to talk about a bunch of news from the last week and learn something in the process, and hopefully helping someone else that will watch or listen to these episodes to learn as well, right? um, this just a little reminder that I'm going to do multiple times tonight. We are now live on Twitch, and you're more than welcome to interact in the chat. So we will have a look at that and possibly answer to any questions you will write. But this video will be re-uploaded on YouTube later, and Spotify and other audio platforms. See you there, and feel free to share any comments or feedbacks about the project. Tonight, I have with me Richard Davis from the 13 Cubes. Just a YouTube channel, or is there anything else?
Yes. So 13 Cubed is best known for YouTube, but it's also a company that produces training courses and things of that nature too. So
Yeah, that's great. And I usually ask guests to have a little introduction of themselves. Would you like to do that?
sure. Yeah. So hello everyone. I'm Richard Davis. I created 13 Cubed as a side project. I was just looking. The first video I uploaded, I think, was early 2017, and just started getting into digital forensics and making digital forensic content. There's also some general information security types of content as well that I make on the YouTube channel of the same name, 13 Cubed. So, long story on how that name came to be, by the way. Maybe we can talk about that later. But anyway, yeah, that's what I do. My day job is I work as a digital forensic investigator for Microsoft. So I've been doing that for going on 3 years now. Prior to that, I was a CISO for a large organization in the aeronautical industry. Prior to that, or aeronautical and education, I should say. Prior to that, I was also a CISO for an educational institution. Prior to that, I had my own consulting business and did all sorts of things there, from networking and general IT type work, building high performance computers, things like that. So, kind of done a lot of things in the tech field. So,
Nice, that's cool. And I was just saying to Richard before, like when we were offline, that I definitely go to know your YouTube channel because I was so interested in digital forensics when I wasn't really actually doing it. Again, thank you very much for the work you do, because I'm the just one of the people that are benefiting from it. So yeah, keep doing that.
mm,
We
yeah,
are thankful.
awesome.
Cool. So I guess we can actually start. If this is the first time you watch this, and by the way, I see a comment in the chat. Hi, Ulverania. I hope that's spelled correctly. If this is the first time you watch this, the format is very, very simple. I have selected a few news, and we will have a chat about it together with Richard. So I'm gonna share my screen right now with the first one. Should be here. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now. So I'll have a very, very quick introduction about the news itself, just to understand what we are talking about, and then we will just talk, on it. So the first news, it could be just, yet another ransomware attack to another company. But I think there are few details that could be interesting to talk about. So the fact here involves two companies that I believe they are actually two different brands from the same company. but they are in fact cloud providers. So companies, in fact, delivering different kind of services that the customers are basically outsourcing to their own infrastructure. Something like emails, websites, or even just cloud storage, and so on and so forth. So basically, these two companies suffered ransomware attack, and this is actually the bad part of the story, because they appear to have lost pretty much all of the customers' data. So all of the websites, email, and other documents that their customers are storing or were storing before on this cloud service. And they basically already said that they have no way to restore the data, nor they intend to pay the ransom to just try to decrypt the data. Now, I think this could be an interesting news to talk about, because this can definitely happen, right? You are hit by a ransomware, and by the way, we already mentioned this multiple times during the previous episodes, but ransomware is basically a malware that aims to encrypt all of the data that is targeting to. So the company lose access to the data, and in order to recover the data, they are asked to pay a ransom, right? So you pay a ransom, and I give you back the decryption key so you can recover all of your data. They don't want to do this, so since they cannot recover through their own backups, there is no data to recover whatsoever. So like my first thought, and maybe I'm a bit biased, but um, like what what chances or what alternatives um, a company that is hit by a ransomware has to actually recover the data, right? I just want to have a brainstorming on what are all of the different possibilities before reaching this status. What would you like to start, Richard?
Sure. Yeah. I hate to use the answer. It depends, but yeah, it does depend on their architecture, right? But what we see with or what I've seen personally with a lot of organizations is that they will have backups, but the backups are directly accessible from the same network that the normal data is stored on, right? So if there's a ransomware event that happens in the network, then those backups are among the data affected by that particular event, rendering the backups useless because they're not properly segmented and they're not taking those steps to ensure that they are indeed isolated from the rest of the network. So unfortunately, that kind of thing does happen, and sadly, this kind of story. This is not the first time this has happened, right? This has happened quite often with you know people putting their complete trust in some sort of cloud provider, putting all of their eggs in that basket, if you will, assuming that
Mhm.
because it's the cloud, because it's not on premises, that it must be safe, right? Because it's stored somewhere else, so we don't have to worry about it, right? We just wash our
Yeah.
hands up. But unfortunately, that ends up not being the case. So
Yeah, that is basically the first option, right? If you did your, let's say, your job right, you should have some backups that should not be encrypted as the same way all of the rest of the data, and basically you just try to restore your backups, right? Now there could be actually multiple reasons why you are not able to do that. One of the reasons is like what we see in this case, where the backups are encrypted. But I've seen other scenarios where I don't know, the backups are too old, right? So what you restore is not exactly what you would like to have, or you never try to restore your backups, so they are not actually working properly, right? So yeah, there could be different reasons why that doesn't work. Um, the like I'm gonna say the other option, the probably easiest one, but not the best one, I will say, is just try to pay the ransom in order to ask for the decryption key. Now we could talk a lot about why you shouldn't do that, right? But I also know that in some specific case, maybe that's the only the only option you have. So I tend not to say, okay, you never have to pay it, right? If you can avoid to do that, but I know there will be some special cases where that's the only option available, which in this case they choose not to do. So maybe it's just too much to pay, or I don't know, because they're not saying they're shut down the company. They're just saying, okay, you customers lost everything. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Not sure this is the best way to you know to face this kind of issue, but we will see what we come they will achieve later. But what else? Like, in case I don't want to pay my ransom, and I don't have enough, or decent backups available, um, to restore my data. Is there any other option, like for the company itself or for the customers? Because I think not the best option, but there should be something, right?
Yeah, it depends. For me, what I always like to say, and when I was in other roles that were more of infrastructure security and kind of managing that, is that
Hmm.
I never like to put all of my trust in any one place, right? So
Yeah.
while I'm using a cloud provider to host some critical resource, I would still treat that as an extension of my on-premises resources and have a backup strategy for the cloud as well. Have a backup strategy that extends into the cloud, and don't just assume that because you're shifting that responsibility to a cloud provider that absolves you of having that kind of backup strategy. I think a lot of people go that route, and don't engineer their resources in the cloud to be as secure in some cases as the on-premises resources. So I feel like having a solid backup strategy to ensure that anything you place in the cloud is also backed up in another method, in addition to whatever that cloud service provider may be doing, is the key. I do that personally. Like if I
Mhm.
use cloud services, for example, the cloud services that hosts the courses that I sell, right? There are, there's probably 120 gigs of video content up there with those rendered videos and everything built out and all the modules and sections and lessons and everything. But I also have a local backup of that. And then that local backup is mirrored to a NAS. And then that
Mhm.
NAS is mirrored to Backblaze. And then that backup is also backed up on a separate hard drive that's stored offsite. So it's like, I try to have a, what is it, the 3-2-1 backup strategy. Um,
Yeah.
so I try to make sure there's multiple copies. Now, obviously, for some, small businesses and things like that, versus larger enterprises, the feasibility of doing that may change. Maybe there are terabytes or hundreds of terabytes of data that's in the cloud, and they don't have a way to back up that data on via some other method or whatever. I don't know. I realize there are variables there, but I think the thing is that people need to stop assuming that just because they have moved resources to the cloud, that they are inherently better off from a security perspective, that they are protected, and that they don't need to worry about it. You need to treat the cloud as an extension of your own resources and architect whatever you're using as a cloud resource to be as secure as you would an on-premises resource. So I think that's a big part of it. But back to the company itself, if they've lost all the data, they don't have any way to recover it. Um, you know, I, I can understand why they wouldn't want to pay the ransom. I would love to say that no one should ever pay the ransom. I understand there are circumstances that necessitate that. You've got the opportunity of, okay, I'm going to go out of business and lose everything, or I can pay the ransom. Then I understand. Um, I guess my thought would be, if there is any way to avoid it at all costs, that's what I would do, because otherwise you're just furthering that criminal ecosystem and making it more likely that that kind of thing is going to continue, which it is
Yeah.
obviously. So
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. So yeah, I also agree with the fact that okay, you're using a cloud provider. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take care of your data, or just consider it you know still your responsibility. Okay, it's your data, So it's your responsibility to manage them and possibly have an additional backup, right? Again, maybe the cloud provider is already doing something. Hopefully, right? You have to check.
Mhm.
Just doesn't don't take that as granted. Um, some cloud providers are also you know giving like disaster recovery options, or if anything happens to an entire data center, you still have like a copy of your data somewhere else. But
Mhm.
still, if it's feasible to have a completely separate, like you are taking data and storing somewhere where it's not connected to the same network, right? Because that's the point here. If the ransomware is encrypting both the working data and the backups, it means that all of the systems were attached to the same network, right? And if the malware find a way to just spread in all the network, everything is going to be encrypted. So you really need something completely separated, completely segregated from it. Now I don't know if anyone can do the 4 or 5 different backups like you are doing right now, because that's also a lot of work, and there's also a lot of things that you need to um, check that they are actually working when you restart something. For a big company, that's not really that easy. But yeah, that's actually it. I'm also thinking, what about, and tell me your also your experience with this. What about some extreme uh, you know um, restore options, something like I don't know, some system maybe you can recover something with the shadow copies on the system, something that maybe people don't really know about,
Mhm.
right? Something that is maybe configured as default or something like that. Would you say that that's something feasible to, like in a case like this?
In most cases, no, because most modern ransomware, just about any ransomware I've seen, one of the first things that it does on Windows systems, anyway, is delete any volume shadow copies that exist, because that is
Hmm.
such a quick go-to method to go back and almost like using Time Machine from Apple or something, where you can go back and pull historical copies of data. So unfortunately, most ransomware will kill those shadows as well. Um, yeah, there's not a whole lot of recourse, honestly. But it also goes back. I guess this is tangentially related to that. But if you consider a company that regardless of their size, whether they're a very small company or a very large company, if they architect their services, whatever they're building in the cloud, on say whether it's Azure or AWS or GCP or whatever it is, the ability exists in those massive cloud platforms to do things that would cost you as an organization, you know, potentially millions or tens of millions of dollars to do, that you could never even think about doing, previously, prior to those services being available. But now that they are available, the capability exists to go to a cloud provider like Azure and architect something that is incredibly robust and incredibly secure by creating having the data stored in multiple places, having segmentation of that data, making sure that you have the privileged rights management, and everything is segmented and tier, following a tiering model. All those things can be done in the cloud provider resource, as if you had that money, that capability for an on-premises data center or something like that. Which, like I said, it's amazing because it extends that capability to the smallest customer. When years ago, before this kind of cloud resource was available, that was just something that was seemingly impossible because people didn't have the resources to do that. So I guess, to sum it up, it is as secure as you architect it to be, and you have the capability to build something with resources like Azure or AWS or GCP that is incredibly robust and secure and segmented. I mean, you can even choose different availability zones that are in different geographical
Hmm.
regions of the world, and all these options exist. And even at a small scale type of environment for a smaller business, you can do that without a massive expense, without having to stand up your own data centers and worry about all the things that were just seemingly out of reach for someone just getting started. So I think it all goes back to, it's as secure as you architect it to be. And sadly, this kind of event There is no 100% prevention of it, right? Like there's no
Of
totally
course.
secure environment. You have to assume that at some point this kind of thing is going to happen. And the question is, how quickly can you recover from it, right? How have you architected the environment such that you have some sort of disaster recovery in place? So when this happens, you've got a playbook, you know what to do. Um, I think it all comes back to that. But anyway,
Yeah.
just my rambling thoughts on the situation.
No, that's. I think that's actually no, direct to the point. The point is that the options are there, but you need to take care of them and actually enable them, pay for them, and whatever. Because
Right.
you know if you just take something like any service and you just think that by default it's secure by design, like it could be on a certain level, of course, but still depending on of course your threat model, how critical are your data, and what kind of threats you are facing, and so on and so forth, you need to proactively think about it and enable all of the measures that you will need in your specific case, right? And that will include everything you mentioned plus anything that you want to build on your own, if you want like an on-premise copy of your data, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Now, before we go to the next news, I just would like to comment comment the comment. Sorry for the repetition here, by Ulverania, where they were saying negotiation is the key. They were referring about the ransom, right? So it's of course, this relates to the fact that you already are considering to pay the ransom, which we already said is not exactly the best choice to do. But let's pretend that this is really the only option available. Otherwise, the company shut down, right? And that's true. So, especially recently, negotiation is a way to lower the cost of the ransom, right? You keep negotiating with the ransom group. Still, that's something that you need to know how to do, right? There are professional, companies and services doing that, and so it's not easy. It's not like everyone can just do that. And additionally, I will say that in some countries, this is not exactly something exactly legal. Like, I don't know how to say this, because still, if you are even as a third party involved in the process, if you are negotiating with the attackers here, and you are basically um, gaining money from doing that, in some way you are suggesting that it's good or it's okay to pay the ransom, right? Because you're taking some money out of it. So it's not always an option. That's my thought about this. Depends on if you have the capabilities, if you still have some money to pay someone else that has the capabilities, if you can do that quickly, and if this is something that you can actually do in your country in general. I don't know if you had any experience like this before.
Yeah, no direct experience. Usually, I'm on the other side of it, right? I'll come in after an event has happened and try
Yeah.
to try to perform forensics and determine the initial exploitation vector. How did they get in? How did they move laterally? What systems were affected, et cetera. Ransomware, from a forensic standpoint, is it's kind of like walking in though to a crime scene where there's blood everywhere, right? So it's pretty obvious that something happened. It's not like you have to go find it. It's like, what happened here? Well, clearly everything's encrypted, the entire environment's leveled, so it's pretty obvious what happened, right? But still, from a forensic standpoint, in those types of cases, I think the questions that are always front of mind for the customer is how did they get in, and what systems did they move to laterally? Though generally, those are the ones, of course, that are self-answerable because they're the ones that were encrypted, right? But those kinds of questions are the ones that are generally front of mind for the customer. And of course, also, what did they take, right? What data left the house?
Yeah.
So, which is always a hard question to answer unless they have the proper, um, you know, telemetry and logs and whatnot in place, the flow data, things like that. It's kind of hard to answer those questions. I do like the comment to the same person made that saying they're in business also. It's absolutely true, right? Because these are criminal enterprises. In some cases, they have they have call centers for some of these threat actor groups that they actually have their own call centers. They have their own customer support where you can call and get help because after all, if you're willing to pay, it's in their best interest to provide you with that product, which is the key,
Yeah.
right? The decryption key, because they want to show you that if you do pay, right? Because that way the word spreads. Oh yeah, I was able to get my data back. I was able to pay and I got my data back. So yeah, they're running a business, albeit a very shady and illegal one. They're running a business, and yeah, it's that's the sad fact of the matter. These are criminal enterprises that operate in some ways like an actual business that would be, legit, which this clearly is not. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and that's also something that we very often, reiterate on also on other episodes. Yeah, just because I really like to remember people that you know they are humans, they are making money out of it, they have a structure. So you're just have to consider that, right? You have to be aware of that,
Yeah,
and respond accordingly.
yeah.
Now, if you're okay with this, Richard, I will actually move to the next one,
Sure.
to the next news. Uh, this one is something that was pretty, pretty big in the news recently, and I think there are a few things that are very interesting, and we could deep dive in. So we are talking about Duolingo. Duolingo is basically an app or even maybe a website where you just learn new languages, and there was I'm not sure if to call it actually data breach, but there were for sure a list of 2.6 million user information that were published in hacking forum, right? Actually, in two different hacking forums. In the first one back in January, if I'm not wrong, and more recently, that hacking forum was shut down, and on a new one, the same data was republished again. So now there was some discussion about this because Duolingo didn't really do much about it, right? And the reason behind that is that this data was not actually like stolen from the inside of the company, right? There was no, or at least we don't know about any um, successful compromise from where the attackers exfiltrated the data. Actually, they used a legit API, so something that Duolingo, built on purpose to enable the user to get information about their own accounts. And the problem with this API is that apparently it was giving out a little more than what is generally expected. In this specific piece, they are talking about the email address, right? So this is something that you know generally should not be available to everyone. But you need to either use the username to get the email address, or have the email address to get the username. So what the uh, potentially the attackers did was to have a list of usernames that maybe they gathered from somewhere else, or a list of email addresses, and try as many requests as possible to get the other information,
Right.
right? So either they had already a list of email addresses from another breach or something, and they just tried to request to this API, okay, what's the user name associated with this email address, and do that again until you build this 2.6 million database. So that was the actual complaint about this. Like for some people, or I would say probably most people out there, Duolingo should change the way the API actually, give out information, or what kind of data, is actually available through that. Um, I think this is the interesting point. is this something, could we call this a data breach? Is this an actual compromise? Is this a security issue or not? I know there's no good answer to that, right?
Yeah.
But I like to see what we have here.
Yeah, that I would definitely say it's a security and privacy issue for sure, right?
Mhm.
Whether or not legally it's considered a breach or not, I suppose that depends on the country and a lot of other factors. But for me, it would absolutely be an issue that I think that the company, would want to address and take very seriously. We take security seriously, right? The standard response anytime something happens. But no, I think it's absolutely an issue. I think absolutely the company should audit the APIs that are publicly available, any company, to determine exactly what information can be pulled via that API. I can't think of specific examples, but I know this isn't the first time this has happened with a public API that returned more information than it was assumed could be gotten from using that method, and the information was scraped. So again, while it may not be considered a quote unquote data breach, it is certainly an issue, and it goes back to the company themselves needing to make sure that they audit what information is available with any kind of public facing API and limit that to whatever the bare minimum is that's necessary to provide whatever function they're providing, right? Um, it also I don't know the whole background story here, but this goes back to a couple of other related thoughts. Um, Services like Have I Been Pawned that Troy Hunt runs obviously are very, very useful to be subscribed to, right? And if you have things like one password that integrate with that, all the better, right? So that way when your account is shown up in some sort of breach, and you know exactly what information was among the potential information that was leaked. I think it's very useful to use services like that because this kind of thing it just happens pretty much continuously. I get, I must get, I don't know, it's several a month, I would say. From Have I Been Pawned and similar types of situations like this, where you've got a company that either has been you know completely breached, or the data has been scraped via some method that was previously not known, and you know your email address has appeared in a data breach along with 34 million other accounts or whatever it is, right? So yeah, it's unfortunate. So I think you just have to assume at this point that all of your information is out there. Yeah.
Yeah, which is sad, right?
Yep, it is.
So you mentioned that something like this happened before. Of course, it happened, but there's actually a very famous case, which was the Facebook data breach,
Oh,
where
yeah,
through an API,
yeah,
right, they were getting phone numbers.
yep, yep.
Uh, I just highlighted this here because I wanted to remember. Yeah, there was a like, how do we call this? Like not a fee, but yeah, the data protection commission from Ireland fined Facebook for $265 million, or
Yeah,
sorry, euros. So that's like, of course, this is not the way you should take regulations, but you have to consider that not only the damage that the attack itself is doing to your company, if you don't do things right, like in this case, uh, you can also face like a fine like this, or still very important one, right?
absolutely.
So yeah, this is basically very similar, because in that case, still they were not getting credentials or password or whatever, but they were getting phone numbers which should not be there, like should not be available to anyone on the internet, just if they ask for it. And it's a very similar case. I don't know about the yeah, maybe the number of users, of course, are not the same, but still depends on how big is your company, how big is your user base, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
See some comments here. Let me have a look at it. Hey, hi, Zambroid, always there, always with us. Thank you very much. So more generally, like APIs, I think recently API in general is are a very tough topic, um, mostly because I think we started to have even regulations that force some specific sectors, some specific companies to actually build them, right? To make data available for other entities. And it's actually, I think it's also a trend. Like if you don't have your own APIs with your service, you're not as cool as the other, competitor. So
Yep.
everyone is doing that. At the same time, probably we don't have the same, and this is my my personal opinion on this. Maybe we don't have the same awareness or knowledge about APIs on how to secure them compared to generally websites or any other services, just because it's something uh, like more new compared to the other kind of services. But we see this so often, right,
Mhm.
that just developers or whoever didn't really think too much about what data they are exposing through APIs.
Yep.
um, I'm not sure if this is just my perception or
No, no,
it's actually a thing right there.
it makes sense. I think it comes back to many different factors, like the companies being good stewards of the data that they are collecting from their users, and also having some sort of legitimate purpose to collect that data to begin with. Because a lot of times, data, you're asked for data that is completely irrelevant. It's not even necessary to provide that data for you to receive whatever service. They're just using that information for, you're the product, right? They're collecting the information that you don't even need to provide, and then the company, not being a good steward of the data that they have and not auditing their APIs that are public facing. There's all kinds of potential issues there. Um, I mean, it's tough. Like I said, it's almost like you just have to assume that your data is leaked everywhere now. But even with that being the case, even with that assumption, every time I sign up for any kind of new service, new platform, which I actually despise because I hate creating an account if I don't have to. One of the first things that I look at is, okay, what is the bare minimum amount of information I can provide to this organization to get whatever it is I am trying to receive from them? And that's what I do. And even in some cases, um, in the United States, going to a medical office can be a similar way. I go to a medical office for a new dentist or something. I'm looking at this crooked photocopied piece of paper attached to a clipboard with a pen that they give me to fill out because I'm a new patient. And among the information it's asking for is my birth date and my social security number, U.S. social security number. I leave a lot of that stuff blank. I go turn it in. They're like, "Well, you didn't fill that out." My answer is, "Well, do you need that information?" "Well, no, we don't need it, but we just, it's on there, so we usually collect it." I'm like, why are you collecting it if you don't need it? That's stupid. Like, anyway, it's the same kind of thing with these services. When I create an account or something, yeah, I give the bare minimum amount of information that I need to give. But it comes back to the company. In a lot of cases, you have to put some degree of trust that they're going to do the right thing, and hopefully be a good steward of the data you are giving them. But ultimately, sometimes things happen. So yeah.
Yeah, and still, even if the company itself is trying to do the right thing, right?
Hmm.
Uh, no one is 100% secure,
Absolutely not.
no matter what, right?
Yep.
So
It's very.
unfortunately, you always have to think like, okay, it's not if, it's when is this is going to happen. And as you said, if you try to contain the kind of data you are sharing on the first place, maybe that's just the best thing to do, because
Yep.
in the worst scenario, what is going to be published is maybe not the most important information you have, like the social security number in your case. um, but yeah, it's really
Yep.
tough, really
Very.
tough.
Yep. I also, just somewhat related to that too, I really appreciate companies who, when they do experience, whether it is an actual data breach or the data scraping event, or whatever kind of security event that they do experience, I think the best companies are those that are prepared for it and that are very communicative.
Mhm.
What's the word? They put the word out immediately. They're like, here's everything we know so far. Here's what we're doing about it. we will provide updates. A lot of them, they'll even stand up a special website that has all of that information. They're updating it. They're not being silent about it. They're like, hey, here's everything we know so far. Here's what we're doing. Here's what you can expect. Here's when you can expect the next update, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like you know, being prepared and understanding that these things are inevitably going to happen and being prepared for them when they do. And I think how the company responds to that says a lot about the company.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I think we were mentioning this on probably in the last episode, like how much communication, like the communication aspect of the responding an incident for a company, um, it's bigger and bigger. Every no nowadays, just because it say, as you said, it says a lot. Your own customers, your own users will have a different experience of the incident itself, because the incident was there, so the data was already published or compromised or whatsoever. But the fact that you are able to communicate exactly what happened, right, and just don't leave people to wonder what happened, and also update in the process every time you have some kind of news about the event. It's really important, and I think uh, you know something one thing is the technical part, like you have to have the technical capabilities, or the technology and everything, but also to train and prepare the communication department or whoever is going to do that. It's not something easy for many companies, right? So you will have the security experts that maybe know their stuff, but communicating something externally for a very big company that maybe has various mediums where they share data, that's another tough activity that I would personally not know the best way to do it, right? You have to train your people, have the people prepared to do that,
I,
right?
I think I think from putting my CISO hat back on when I was in that role, and what we did at my previous role, in fact, was bring the key stakeholders together well in advance, of any kind of event. Just bring everyone together, and that would include public relations, legal, finance, IT, obviously, IS if there's a separate information security team. Having all the key stakeholders together, so you have point of contacts, you know exactly what the playbook is when something like this happens. Not if, but when something like this happens. Who are we going to contact? In what order? Who is responsible for what? I mean, just coming up with a playbook. It doesn't have to be some binder that's this thick. It could literally be a sheet or two of paper that says we're going to do the following things in the following order. These are the people that need to be notified in this order. Here is the position, not necessarily even the name, because people come and go from
Yeah,
organizations, but
the role or
when this
something.
happens, yeah, exactly. We're going to contact this position, this title person, and then we're going to do these things in this order, and then on down the list. I think that kind of thing is critical to plan and prepare in advance. And some organizations do that; they do a good job of it. Others that are less security mature wait until after something like that happens. But ultimately, that planning, that preparation, and bringing those people together, it doesn't cost anything except some time. Create a Word document and an Excel spreadsheet or whatever you need, and plan. And I think that goes a long way.
Hmm.
And it doesn't cost anything theoretically except time. So yeah.
Yeah, but still another like the backup discussion we were having before, something that you need not only to create once, but also to possibly test and
Yeah.
update, right? Because something can change in the structure of your company or something. So still the fact that you create the playbook once, like I don't know, 5 years ago, and never use it, or
Yep.
never just try it, and suddenly something happens, and most of your people don't know that this Word document exists somewhere.
Yep.
uh, you know
Absolutely. It's got to be
it's more like a process problem than the document itself, right?
absolutely. Yeah. Whether it's quarterly or biannually, some sort of recurring meeting where you can make sure the information is still relevant and up to date. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So I think we can now move again to the next news.
Mhm.
I will just take a few seconds to remember once again, if you're watching this and if you're enjoying this, like I'm doing right now, thanks Richard, by the way, please, please, please consider hit that follow button, subscribe button, or whatever you have in front of you, because that says something about the project and just telling me and us that it makes sense to continue doing it. So please do that and leave us any feedback in the comments or wherever. You also have an email address in the description of the video if you're looking at, where you can directly write to me and let me know if anything can be improved or if you have any ideas or whatsoever. Please do that, and I will be it will be very, very appreciated. Cool. So next news, just a very interesting feature that they found on a recent malware that I thought it was good to talk about. Um, the malware, they call it Whiffy. Not sure if you spell like that, Wi-Fi or Whiffy Recon, and I'm not sure exactly what was the company analyzing this. Maybe we'll find
Yeah,
out.
I think SecureWorks
Yeah, I
is
think that's the one. It's
one.
specified somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, they analyzed the malware. They did some reverse engineering malware analysis of the code and find out that there was a very, very interesting feature of this malware that basically scans the Wi-Fi network, so the available. So let me start from the beginning. The malware basically infects the system, right? And one of the first things that it does is basically try to figure it out which and how many Wi-Fi networks are available, right? From the computer's perspective, and then actually updates that list of networks through a Google geolocation service, which is useful for them to geolocate through the Wi-Fi triangulation where the computer is physically placed, right? So this is basically it, right? This is the actual fact that is very interesting. And my first question when I first read this was, why attackers will need something like this? Like, we can speculate a bit because of course we don't really know. Unfortunately, we don't have the comments in the code that say, okay, this is useful because or still attackers don't really often do that. But it's a very interesting feature that we don't see that often in many other similar malwares. And it's interesting to understand what it can be used for. Why is this something we should be concerned about, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm not surprised this kind of thing
Mhm.
exists. In fact, I would have thought someone would have done this before, because if you think about the from a technological standpoint, I wouldn't think it would be that hard to invoke, like the Windows, what is it, WLAN service or zero
Mhm.
configuration service, whatever, to like enumerate the networks that you're seeing, and then just send that information back to C2, which I think is exactly what this was doing, right? It was just sending
Yeah.
posts back to the C2 server that contained the Wi-Fi networks as it performed the scans every minute or whatever the interval was. So my original thought was, as to why, uh, perhaps intimidation, like, hey,
Hmm.
we we know that you are physically located in this particular community in this city, and we're watching you. You need to pay us the money, or we're gonna blah blah blah. That kind of thing. Some sort of intimidation factor, or is something that can be used for extortion. I don't know. Maybe that's part of it, but um, just pure speculation. I don't know, but it is
Yeah,
interesting.
like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Like, it's basically something like, I know where you live, right?
Yeah.
Or where you work, or whatever. The fact that usually the most of the time the target of attackers is data they can steal, data they can compromise, or they can prevent you accessing them anymore. So you pay something to regain access or something. The point is that attackers needs a way to monetize,
Mhm.
right? Otherwise, most of the time, otherwise, unless they are motivated by some uh, you know they want to steal some data because they are coming from a competitor, or it's another state that is against yours or something. Most of the time they just want to monetize, and to monetize they need to force you some way. So they're gonna maybe intimidate you, as you mentioned before. And to do that, I read something before related to, I don't know, I recorded you via your webcam, I compromised your webcam, so I have your intimate photos or videos in front of your computer. So
Yep.
if you don't pay me, I'm gonna publish that or something. This
Mhm.
could be something similar where I as the attacker, I could I recorded you. Actually, this is actually specified here that the process happens every 6 seconds. So there's an actual recording of any kind of movements in case you have a laptop or something, right? So I not only know where you are, but also potentially where you move,
Yep.
right? So maybe I know where you live, where you work, where do you, I don't know, take your children to or something. And that could be something they attackers can use as a leverage. So I
Absolutely.
know you are there, I know where you live, I could, I don't know, call some people to go to your place in case you don't pay me. So
Yep.
this is actually very big.
Yep.
Could
Pattern.
be.
Yep. Basically establishing a pattern of life and behavioral analysis type stuff. So yeah, it's could definitely be used for bad things.
Yeah. Or I'm also now thinking about, what if it's just used as in a spyware, where the actual aim of the malware is basically collecting information about the target, profiling or
Sure.
knowing everything about them.
Yep.
Uh, I don't think this is the case, or at least the malware they were investigating. Um, it was previously used for that kind of reason, but still, uh, knowing that this is the other thing interesting about malware analysis in general. You're not only you are figuring out what this specific malware is doing, but you can also identify like trends, okay? Because we know attackers are also, stealing or sharing resources between each other. So if something is, if we start to see something on a malware, it's highly possibly that um, tomorrow we will see something similar in other malwares as well,
Mhm.
right? So something like this could start to be an interesting thing to see, especially because maybe we've seen something like this before, but mainly focused on the GPS and on mobile phones, right? This is actually very useful to be like targeting computers like laptops or whatever, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So so yeah, this was a really interesting. I really think that ever read of this kind of news and be aware of what the malwares out there are not only capable of, but where is um, the train going, could be very useful. We've also discussed in some previous episodes about some um, some side channels attacks that potentially could steal data through a webcam recording your laptop, or just recording audio from your room or something.
Mm.
Again, it's maybe not something that is the real target right now, or it's not something that is being used nowadays, but it could be one of the concern you know so some users or some companies could have at some point, right?
Mhm.
So I think this is a big part of as a security practitioner to be aware of what's going on out there, right? Even if it's not something that you are facing at the moment, even if that's not something that you are really facing in your daily job, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so I don't see any comments here. So if you're okay with this, Michelle, I'm gonna move to the next and last news for today.
Sure.
Again, this is a little, I will say, older compared to the other ones, but was also pretty big in different websites. I'll try here to briefly introduce it, but it's going to be a little tough. So everything starts with the Cellebrite. If you don't know Cellebrite, this company is very, very focused on developing technologies and softwares and hardware for digital forensics and for collecting data that can then be used in criminal cases and so on and so forth. They are very heavily used by law enforcement, governments, and so on and so forth um, to access devices from criminals and whatsoever during investigation. And they are especially focused on mobile devices. I think they probably have also solutions for desktop and everything, but I believe they have few competitors that can handle the mobile devices as they can do, and that's the reason why so many law enforcement are using this. And I think we need to contextualize here in order to um, collect data and access a system that is being used during a crime. Not only cybercrime, of course, we could take this on the incident response aspect, right? You are also doing something similar, maybe not so often with mobile devices as in other kind of crimes, but still the goal is to access the system, collect data that you can then analyze to determine what happened based on the data that is inside the system itself, being
Mhm.
that a server, a desktop, or a mobile device.
Yep.
Now, if you are an incident responder, like you're responding to an incident in a big company, most of the time you are given direct access to the system, or ideally, let's say you are given access to the system and you can collect the data you need for your analysis. When law enforcement is doing something similar during another kind of investigation, not a proper, a cyber incident, maybe they don't have a way to legitimately access the mobile device. So maybe, I don't know, let's say there's, I don't know, like a murder scenario where they actually take the mobile device, but it's protected by a password or a pin or something, and law enforcement doesn't actually have that password to access the mobile device, but still has to find a way to collect the data and everything. They're going to use something like Cellebrite solutions to try to force the access to the system and collect everything that is useful for an investigation. Now, if there's a password and you can access the system without a password, and now I'm really simplifying it, of course, uh, the point is that the Cellebrite or whatever vendor solution actually found a way to either bypass the security measure or to force the security measure. So basically, and this is, let's say, my assumption here, they most of the time found a vulnerability to the system that can get law enforcement access to it. And here's where there was this the discussion behind this news. The point here is that a training video or from Cellebrite targeting law enforcement was leaked, and apparently this this teacher from Cellebrite was specifically saying to the law enforcement, okay, this is how we are actually accessing data, but we really want you to not talk about it. Just get your data through using our technology, but please don't share about how we are actually doing this stuff. The reason behind that request is because, and I personally think it's somewhat legitimate, that if you actually share about a specific vulnerability, right, of course that vulnerability is going to be shared with the actual vendor that wants to fix the vulnerability, so that that um, uh, that way of accessing data is not available anymore, right? So at that point, again, law enforcement in this case will not be able to access data in the same way they did, a day ago or a month ago. But at the same time, if the vulnerability is there, even if it's not public, it could be that someone else is also using it for other purposes, right?
Right.
Maybe for less legitimate purposes. Or tomorrow it can lead to some very big incident, and can we say that it was also Cellebrite fault if they don't talk about it, if they don't share the vulnerability with the vendors in order to make them patched?
Yeah.
Again, this is a very hard topic, but I thought it was interesting to have a discussion about it.
I think I've used Cellebrite products before, because I've worked for or work for certain places that are able to use it. Right. A lot of their products aren't just something that anyone can go get it. Right. But
Mhm.
I, I think a couple of things here. Number one, I would find it very hard to believe if the training video or the trainers were actually talking about details about the vulnerabilities they were actually exploiting in iOS and iPad OS and Android OS, to get access to the information they're getting. It's probably more the capabilities that they're talking about in the training. Like, we have the capability to do X, Y, and Z, not
Mhm.
necessarily we have the capability to do X, Y, and Z because we're exploiting this particular API that Apple has in iOS, and we're calling these functions to do these things. I'm sure that they're not sharing that because that's probably a very closely guarded trade secret that I'm sure that that Apple and others would want to know about, right? So that they can, as you said, prevent that from happening. So those are probably more trade secret type things that they aren't sharing. I would imagine this would be more along the capabilities. Say, hey, don't tell people that we have the capability to do X, Y, and Z. But it just seems to tell someone that seems silly because clearly that information is going to get out to the public. So I think that that would just draw more attention to the fact that the software has
Yeah.
the ability to do those things. And honestly, when people in the information security field, especially in the mobile forensics field, you know, there's plenty of public information out there. Let me just say this, that would speak to the capabilities of what some of the particular Cellebrite products can offer. So yeah, I feel like it was just kind of a mistake for the trainer to put that in that kind of video because it's only going to draw more attention to it. The information is pretty widely known. Again, I can't say that I've seen this specific video, so I don't know if there's any
Yeah.
some secret sauce that they've shared in this, but I don't know. I think in general, most people are aware of the capabilities, and yeah. So,
So there's actually, I don't think the video is available anywhere, but there's actually the full transcript in the article itself. I
mhm.
will. I admit that I didn't really read all of it,
Yeah, I didn't
but
read.
I took some some of the pieces that I thought it was they were interesting. And the point is that, like, the trainer is really stressing on the fact that, okay, like talking directly to the law enforcement people, when you are in court and you are presenting about the data you found thanks to our technology, focus just on the data you collected and don't say how you actually collected it. right? They
Yep.
are really stressing on the how, right? I also don't think they are really going into the specifics of which kind of vulnerability they actually exploit, or how does it work. But
Right.
at the same time, some for some specific vulnerabilities, you have to maybe enable some option in the mobile device in order for the solution to work properly, or something like that. So I think that for the training purposes, they have to share some information about how it's possible to exploit that specific vulnerability. And that's the only reason why I can think about why the trainer should say something like that, right? Because I think that it was something that some way they force him to say, right? Just to protect some of the uh, you know uh, company important information, because of course that's their business. They
Yeah.
will want and need to protect. um, but yeah, otherwise there's no real reason why you should say something like that.
Right.
As you said, it's the opposite effort that you are actually having.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It was probably something along those lines, but if you with any product, if you have a small group of people and you're like, hey, look at this cool thing, don't tell anyone else about it. Obviously the information is gonna disseminate out to people regardless. It's just a matter of time. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. I'll say that the what they were able to do with their technology is pretty amazing. Um,
Yeah. And I think that's the problem, like not the problem, but the point here, the fact that this is a field where vendors have really to stay on really updated, because every new fix, every new patch of the vendors can prevent your solution to work
mhm.
as it was working just a few days before. And when someone, a company like Cellebrite makes their reputation is to be always able to find a new way to access the data, no matter what are the new security measures, what are the new fixes, new patches, which of course make you the let's say most famous, or just the most effective solution out there.
Yep.
um, but yeah, I like the discussion related to this point right here. Always come to that kind of debate, right? So of course, Celebrite and similar companies, not just Celebrite, have access to some I will call it 0 days right now, right? Because I think personally that that's what they are. So if we are talking about a vulnerability that publicly no one knows about, or the vendor doesn't know about it, is basically a 0 day.
Mhm.
And if someone like Celebrite has some very, very critical 0 days associated with the very commonly used devices, like an iPhone, or another mobile device that I don't know how many millions people out there are actually using, right?
Yep.
The point is that a vulnerability is something that you discover but you don't own, right? So it means that on the opposite place of the planet, someone else can actually find the same thing and use it in a with other purposes, possibly malicious purposes. And you have some responsibility in the moment that you find that vulnerability. So there are researchers who are doing that only to um, yeah, to communicate that to the vendors so they can fix and patch the issues. And on the other end, we have also these vendors that, of course, are doing this maybe still for a legitimate purposes, but someone will say that at the same time they're doing some bigger damage. So again, I know this is not something that we will find the answer today,
Yeah.
and probably I actually I had a very good phrase the other episode. Like, if this is a very good question, it means that it has no current answer, right? Um, I think it's interesting to just to iterate a little about this. Still looking at the comments here. Hi, Rocco. Yeah, I don't know. What's your thought about this? Like, is it legit to have this kind of research and take your vulnerability for you, or let's say for you, or just for some sort of scenarios and not other scenarios?
Yeah, it's man, that's tough. I can say that I can see both sides of the story, but I can certainly see that if you're discovering a vulnerability, not telling anyone about it, and then using that vulnerability to make money to, provide some sort of service, that one could say, well, that's, what about responsible disclosure and whatnot? You can't do that. So I totally see that side of it. At the same time, I totally understand the importance of providing these services to law enforcement to enable them to investigate child predators and other kinds of bad people that are that are doing these things. And I certainly want them to be investigated and
Yeah,
um, locked up. It's very very tough. I don't think it's black and white. I don't think it's binary.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's about all I could say about that. It's I can see both sides.
No, absolutely. I'm actually curious on how some people can really be on the black or white side, right?
Mhm.
Because uh, there are so many different aspects. You cannot really say that no, it's better if Cellebrite stops doing what they are doing right now, right? Because so many good outcomes are also coming from the usage of their solutions, of course.
Yep.
uh, you know uh, Probably we cannot even count how many um, investigators are using their tools or other similar tools to
Oh
find who's uh, the real criminal behind the crime. So especially nowadays, I think I'm not in that exact field, but probably any crime nowadays always involve at least a mobile device.
yeah. Hmm.
So it's really highly probable that a solution like this is being used, I don't know, in your town by your local police, maybe at this very moment, right? So it's
It's a huge.
very important, and of course, it's difficult to say whether you are right or you're wrong. Everyone has their own interests. Celebrate as their, of course, there. As you mentioned, they are also making money of it. So it's not uh, like a non-profit or something.
Right.
But there are other considerations, especially if during trainings, again, we don't know for sure, but especially if during trainings or something like this, you are also mentioning something about it. Because if the video itself can be leaked, some other information can be leaked as well. And, again, I'm always a little concerned about what if someone else learns how to or that there's a specific vulnerability and maybe at some point also reaches to develop its own exploit for the same thing, right? Because it happens.
Hmm. Very true.
So I'm not sure if there was something else about this news right here that I wanted to highlight. Uh, yeah, uh, uh, if we exclude the training itself, like we, I was curious to say, okay, someone leaked that video, and this is a video intended for just law enforcement. So of course we don't know, but if we really think about who actually shared this video with the TechCrunch in this case, it's definitely or most possibly one of the customers of Cellbrite, right? So that's possibly one of the reasons why they need to think twice before saying something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I think that's really it. So that is has been great, Richard. I really thank you so much once again. I think I already did this like 3 4 5 times anyway. um but it has been really interesting as usual. I just think that talking with knowledgeable people on very random stuff also. This could be something that you talk with a friend in a bar drinking something, but doing this publicly, I think it really helps so many other people potentially
Yeah.
to be involved in the discussion, especially if, and of course, at least for me, this happens every time. The other person always knows something more than you about a specific topic, maybe. So definitely think this is very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Always
Hopefully,
so much to
yeah,
learn. Always. Yeah.
yeah. You never stop learning
Yep.
if you want, at least.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it as much as me,
Yeah.
and hopefully also the people who watched tonight or will watch the video that will be re-uploaded on YouTube, or the audio on Spotify, will enjoy it. Let us definitely know, and until the time, I will just say hi to everyone, and let's see again on one of the next episodes. Maybe I'll reach out once again to Richard to convince him to join another episode. Who knows?
Sure thing.
So
Absolutely. Thanks
thank you
for having
again. Yep, cool. And I guess have a great day, great night, whatever you are
me.
placed. So
Thank you.
hi everyone. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.